World building can be defined as the creation of a fictional setting. Now, that might be used as a setting for novels, for games or movies, or for all three, like The Witcher, for example, or even for other creative pursuits. Right off the bat, it's really important to note that when we talk about world building, the world part doesn't necessarily refer to a planet. The scope or scale of your world building project might be as small as a city, like Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, or as large as a universe filled with lots of planets, like Star Wars, or even different dimensions, like the Marvel Universe. It's all world building. Similarly, in World Anvil, by the way, when you create a new world, what you're really creating is a new world setting. So remember that when you're starting a new project. World building is often misunderstood to have a very narrow meaning, though. A lot of people think that it's only real world building if you're building like an entirely new fictional universe. Because of this, J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth is a typical example of world building. With its diverse sapient species, like the elves and the dwarves, its unique languages, history, geography, and the like, Tolkien's world of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, and more is what many people consider to be world building. Likewise, the world of Narnia by C.S. Lewis is another classic example, a brand new world with laws of its own, which works differently from the real world, and just happens to be accessible from Earth through a cupboard. From video games to fantasy novels like Skyrim to Star Wars, this definition of world building is the most standard answer. And there's nothing wrong with that. After all, this is certainly world building. But when we're answering the question, what is world building, I think it's super important to make clear that there's definitely more to world building than just this full-on approach. So in answering the question, what is world building, broadly speaking, we can divide world building into three main kinds of setting creation. Imaginary or second world building, alternate Earth world building, and real world building. I'm going to unpack each of those for you. The first kind of world building, which we've already touched on, is second world building. Your entire reality is created from scratch. This includes fictional continents populated by imaginary plants, animals, and even intelligent species. Now, these intelligent or sapient species are often a really vital part of your world building and storytelling. Some creators like to use the so-called Tolkienian races, like dwarves, elves, and halflings. An example of worlds like this include the world of Witcher, as well as the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, for example. On the other hand, you might want to create your own unique sapient species, as they did in Star Trek, or, for example, in Avatar. No, not that Avatar, that Avatar. These kinds of imaginary or second worlds often have conlangs, or constructed languages, created for them. The setting will have a unique history with its own cultures and traditions, its own technologies, and its own problems. Worlds like this, these second worlds, also often have a highly developed magic system or other supernatural laws, but they're not necessarily a component of a second world building project. You can absolutely create an imaginary or second world without magic if you want to. This kind of world building, these second worlds, are a lot of work to flesh out. They might seem daunting, and a lot of world building takes place beneath the surface. That is to say, it's work that might not necessarily make it into your fantasy novel or your tabletop RPG campaign. But they are so much fun to make. This is definitely the kind of world building with the most leeway, the most flexibility, and the most space to explore. But if second world building, or imaginary world building, seems too daunting, then maybe you'll enjoy the second kind of world building, which is alternate Earth style. Your setting is like Earth, but something is different. In this style of world building, something significant in your setting is not like the Earth as we know it. In urban fantasy settings, it's common that vampires or werewolves lurk in the shadows of New York or Louisiana, like Vampire the Masquerade or True Blood. Or perhaps there's a whole secret world of magic beneath the city of London, like Diagon Alley in the world of Harry Potter. Dystopian and science fiction frequently fall into this alternate Earth category too. These genres examine Earth, but in the near or far future. For example, The Hunger Games is a dystopian series set in post-apocalyptic America. The Expanse takes Earth as we know it and extrapolates hundreds of years into the future. Even the Shannara Chronicles, which looks on the face of it like a totally typical Second World Tolkienian fantasy, is actually alternate Earth. All those elves, dwarves, and gnomes are the result of massive mutations from a nuclear-style apocalypse, and ruined cities still dot the landscape. Also in the category of alternate Earth, which has a lot of subtypes of fiction beneath it, is alternate history. Perhaps, like the man in the high castle, it was the Axis powers who won World War II and not the Allied powers. Perhaps England kept hold of its American colonies, and the British Empire is still intact. Or what if we had suddenly discovered signs of alien inhabitation on the moon in 1969? How would that have changed the world? This kind of alternate history takes Earth verbatim until a certain point of divergence. Authors extrapolate on how our world, and our way of life as we know it, might have been transformed due to one or more alterations in history. So in some ways, alternate Earth world building is easier than Second World world building, at least in the start. Your foundation is a given. Your geography and your species, at least for the most part, are already made. You can focus on creating the details of a really interesting setting. But the tricky thing with alternate Earth world building is making sure you create believable leaps, so you don't lose the suspension of disbelief in your readers or players. Handled carefully though, alternate Earth world building is a great place for new world builders to start. But what about the third category of world building? Real world world building. It seems strange. If your novel is set in the real world, or your game, or your comic, why would you need world building? Well, there are actually a lot of reasons, and you're probably doing it already. When you create fictional but realistic towns, schools, and organizations in America, that's also world building. When historical novelists fill in parts of the world not documented by history, they're world building too. Or maybe you've introduced a secret fictional lover into the life of a known historical character. Also world building. Most genres of fiction involve some world building, even if that's just to build out the details of the characters' lives. For example, John Green created the fictional author Peter van Houten in The Fault in Our Stars. And Jane Austen, of all people, Jane friggin' Austen, used fictional places in the real world, like Mr. Darcy's estate of Pemberley in Pride and Prejudice, and the village of Highbury in Emma. This world building is a vital part of a real-world novel or game creation. Whether building fictional people or places, or penciling in details, this kind of world building is vital. It creates a sense of place. It makes your work more memorable. And it can help with tone and atmosphere too. This kind of real-world world building often involves research, followed by a process of filling in the pieces. You'll especially need to fill in sensory details in your scenes to really bring them alive. Dig into those 5 and more senses and use what you world build to heighten the atmosphere that you're trying to create. Does the room smell like jasmine and honeysuckle? Or old drains? Whatever kind of world building you are doing, World Anvil is definitely the place to start and to keep track of what you've created. Our world building templates go through everything you'll need to create your setting. If you're building a real world or historical setting, you'll be able to store your research and note what you've added to fill in the blanks. That includes tracking plots, journeys, stats, as well as all the details of your characters. Those creating alternate Earth settings will be able to create parallel timelines to track their divergent histories and build changes in your world. If you're creating completely new Second World settings, World Anvil will help you build and keep track of everything. We have all the tools, people. And then once the time is right, you can show off what you want to your players or your readers to get them hooked on your new world setting. If you've learned something in this video, or if it's inspired you, then click the like button. And to get more world building advice and inspiration and World Anvil tips and tricks, make sure you subscribe and click the bell, ding, so you don't miss a video. Now grab your hammer and go world build.